The white tablecloth at Maxwell's gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers, but the steak on my plate tasted like ash. Vincent Ramsey, Riverton Manufacturing's CEO, sliced into his meal, his smile polished as ever. "Lucas, you've been invaluable," he said, then paused, his eyes flicking to the side. "But we're going in a new direction. Colin Warwick, Edward's nephew, just graduated from MIT. He'll take over IT. You've got 6 weeks." The words hit like a sucker punch, though I'd seen it coming for months. I smiled, nodded, and signed the non-disclosure agreement he slid across before dessert arrived. "Business decisions," I said, my voice steady. Inside, I was unraveling. They thought I was blind, a loyal cog to be replaced by a shiny new model. But I, Lucas Hale, 42, had built their tech empire from nothing. Those servers, that network, they were mine in every way that mattered. For 11 years, I'd poured my soul into Riverton, turning chaos into order. Now they wanted to erase me. I shook Vincent's hand, my grip firm, and walked out into the Milwaukee afternoon, the city's pulse humming beneath my feet. They didn't know I'd been watching their moves. Unauthorized logins, whispers of fresh perspectives. The system they relied on was my creation, my leverage. As the skyline glittered across the river, I stood at a crossroads. Would I fade quietly, another casualty of corporate games, or make them regret underestimating me? What do you do when the world betrays you, but you hold the key to its collapse? I'm Lucas Hale, 42, and my life fits into a one-bedroom apartment in Milwaukee, where the walls are bare and the fridge holds beer and frozen dinners. Each morning, I wake at 5, brew black coffee, and drive my battered Ford to Riverton Manufacturing, where I've been IT director for 11 years. The job isn't just work. It's my anchor, the thing that kept me afloat after my world fell apart. I built Riverton's tech division from a crumbling mess of Windows XP and sticky note passwords into a 30-person powerhouse running 3 factories round the clock. Those blinking server racks, humming in the basement, are my legacy, though you'd never know it from the company website. I'm the guy who made sure the machines never stopped, who kept millions in equipment humming through blackouts and crises. But to the executives, I'm invisible, a name buried in reports. 11 years ago, I followed Clara Bennett to Milwaukee, chasing her dream of a PhD. I left a solid cybersecurity job in Minneapolis, believing love would outweigh sacrifice. We were young, ambitious, mapping a life together. But 7 years in, Clara left divorce papers on the kitchen counter. "We want different things," she said, her voice flat. No fights, no warnings, just gone. I crashed on my brother's couch, my confidence shattered, until Riverton hired me to fix their ransomware-ravaged network. It was supposed to be temporary, but I saw potential. Their factories, millions in revenue, hundreds of jobs, ran on systems one crash from disaster. I pitched Vincent a 5-year overhaul and he gave me the keys. For 3 years, I barely saw daylight, rebuilding networks, training staff, crafting fail-safes. When the Northeast blackout hit, we were the only plant still running. The board noticed. My budget tripled. I hired a team, good people like Sophie Marshall, my right hand, and Marco Delgado, a coding wizard. We weren't just IT, we were Riverton's heartbeat. I'm a paradox. Relentless at work, solitary at home. I stay late, checking code, because those servers feel more like family than anyone else. I'm friendly but guarded, quick to listen, slow to share. My team trusts me. I shield them from the board's whims, but I carry scars. Clara's departure left me questioning my worth, and every late night at Riverton was a bid to prove I wasn't a failure. My real family is just my brother, far away, and a few old friends I rarely see. I used to dream of a home, kids, but now it's just me and the river outside my window. At night, I watch Milwaukee's lights dance on the water, wondering if I've missed something bigger than circuit boards. My deepest wound, the one I never voice, is a promise to my father before he died. To build something lasting, something proud. Riverton was supposed to be that legacy. But lately, strange signs. Canceled meetings, restricted access. Tell me a storm is coming, threatening to sweep away everything I've made. The air in Maxwell's smelled of polished wood and money. the kind of place where deals were sealed over $100 plates. I sat across from Vincent Ramsey, Riverton's CEO, my fork poised over a steak I couldn't taste. His suit was crisp, his smile rehearsed, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Lucas, you've been invaluable," he began, slicing into his medium rare. I knew that tone, too smooth, too practiced. My stomach tightened, bracing for the blow I'd sensed for months. "But we're going in a new direction," he continued, not meeting my gaze. "Colin Warwick, Edward's nephew, just graduated from MIT. He's got vision, specializes in digital transformation. He'll take over IT." The words landed like a blade, clean and deep. I was being replaced, after 11 years of building Riverton's tech backbone, by a kid who'd never set foot in our factories. "You've got 6 weeks to transition," Vincent added, his voice light, as if he'd just ordered dessert. I should have raged, should have slammed my fist on the table. Instead, I smiled, the kind of smile that hides a storm. "Business decisions," I said, my voice steady, though my chest burned. "They think they can erase me, discard me like an outdated server." Vincent slid a non-disclosure agreement across the table, its edges crisp against the white cloth. I signed it without hesitation, my pen moving like it had a mind of its own. Inside, I was unraveling, memories of Vincent's promises flashing like error codes. "You're the backbone, Lucas," he'd said at the Christmas party, his hand on my shoulder. "We couldn't run without you." Lies, all of it dressed up in corporate charm. I shook his hand, my grip firm, and walked out into the Milwaukee afternoon, the city's hum drowning out the chaos in my head. I drove back to Riverton, my hands tight on the wheel, the skyline blurring past. 11 years, nights without sleep, systems I built from nothing, factories I kept alive. And now, they'd chosen a shiny MIT diploma over me. I wanted to believe it was just business, but it felt personal, like a betrayal carved into my bones. At my desk, I logged into the system, or tried to. My admin credentials were downgraded, my name scrubbed from the leadership email chain. They'd planned this probably weeks ago, while I was still pulling all-nighters to keep their machines running. The realization hit like a second punch. I wasn't just replaceable. I was expendable. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling with the urge to tear it all down. But I didn't. I opened the server logs instead, scanning lines of code like they were my lifeline. They were my creation, my leverage. That night I couldn't sleep. The city lights flickered through my window, mocking my restlessness. I saw my father's face, his voice clear as ever. "Build something proud, Lucas. Something that lasts." I thought Riverton was that something, but they'd turned it into a lie. I pulled my phone and texted Marco Delgado, my best coder, "Joe's, 6:30 tomorrow." No explanation, but Marco would know. I needed allies and I needed a plan. But first, I needed to feel the weight of this betrayal, to let it sharpen me. I drove to the riverfront, where Clara and I used to watch sunsets, the water now black under a starless sky. I parked, my breath fogging in the cold, and reached into my pocket. My fingers found the old silver dollar my father gave me when I left for college, its edges worn smooth. "For luck," he'd said, his eyes full of belief. I gripped it, the metal biting into my palm, pain grounding me. They think they've won, that I'll slink away quietly. I squeezed harder, my knuckles white, the coin's edges cutting into my skin. I wanted to hurl it into the river, let it sink with my pain, but I couldn't. Not this, not his gift. Instead, I held it tight, the ache fueling me, a vow to myself and him. I wouldn't let them break me. I'd make them pay, not with rage, but with the systems I'd built, the truth I'd uncover. As I drove home, the city lights felt different, like they were watching, waiting for my next move. The next morning, Joe's coffee smelled of burnt grounds and early commuters. Marco was already there, his eyes shadowed, nursing a black coffee. "They're phasing you out," I said, no preamble. He nodded, guilt flickering across his face. "They've been asking me to explain your systems, Lucas. For weeks. I should have told you." I didn't blame him. Marco had kids, a mortgage, pressures I'd never know. "What's your plan?" he asked, leaning forward. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness matching my mood. "They think everything's in the documentation," I said, my voice low. "But we know it's not." Marco's eyes lit up. He understood. System Sync, my proprietary tool, wasn't just code. It was my soul, and they'd never grasp its depths. As we parted, the weight of Vincent's words settled deeper. Not just him, but Edward Langston, the man who'd shaken my hand and called me vital, had chosen family over loyalty. I drove to the lakefront again, the water calmer now, reflecting a gray dawn. Why does it hurt so much to be discarded? I'd survived Clara's departure, rebuilt myself from ashes. But this being erased by people I'd trusted cut deeper. I stood there, the wind biting my face, and made a choice. I wouldn't just survive this. I'd turn their game against them, using the very systems they thought they owned. The river stretched before me, silent, holding secrets. Like me, it was deeper than it seemed. The hum of my laptop filled the silence of my apartment, its blue glow casting shadows on the bare walls. I hadn't slept since the lunch at Maxwell's. Vincent Ramsey's words looping in my head like a corrupted file. "We're going in a new direction." I knew it was more than a direction. It was a betrayal, and I needed proof. I opened the server logs I'd backed up 3 months ago, lines of code scrolling past like a confession. There they were, unauthorized access attempts, small but deliberate, from an IP address on the executive floor. I traced it, my pulse quickening. The address led to a terminal registered to Colin Warwick, Edward Langston's nephew, weeks before he'd even been announced. They weren't just replacing me. They were mining me, siphoning my systems, my soul. My fingers froze on the keyboard. They think I'm a fool, a cog to be scrapped after use. But I built this empire, and I'd be damned if I let them steal it. I dug deeper, pulling up old emails, searching for cracks in their facade. One caught my eye, forwarded by mistake 6 months ago from Vincent to Edward. Subject line: IT leadership transition. "Lucas is brilliant but too independent," Vincent wrote. "We need someone malleable, someone like Colin." The words burned, each one a betrayal of the trust I'd given them. I remembered Vincent's hand on my shoulder, his voice warm. "You're the backbone, Lucas." Now I saw the truth. I was a tool, useful until I wasn't. My chest tightened, not with anger but with something heavier. Grief, maybe, for the years I'd poured into Rivorton, for the man I'd thought I was. I pushed it down, focusing on the screen. Grief wouldn't help me now. Evidence would. The next morning, Sophie Marshall slipped into my office, her face pale, her eyes darting to the door. "Lucas, I overheard something in legal," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're building a case against you. Something about misusing IT budgets or leaking data to competitors." The room spun, my breath catching. "They're not just pushing me out, they're trying to destroy me." I forced myself to stay calm, though my hands shook as I opened the budget logs. There they were, transactions I hadn't authorized, tens of thousands moved under my digital signature. Someone had forged it, setting me up to take the fall. If they succeeded, I'd lose everything, my reputation, my savings, my future. I looked at Sophie, her loyalty a lifeline in the storm. "Thank you," I said, my voice low. "Keep this quiet." She nodded, but I saw fear in her eyes, mirroring my own. "They want to bury me, erase every trace of what I've built." I thought of my father, his voice steady. "Stand tall, Lucas, no matter what." But standing tall felt impossible when the ground was crumbling. I called Ryan Caldwell, an old cybersecurity friend, the kind of guy who could find dirt without leaving fingerprints. "I need you to dig," I told him, my voice tight. "Rivorton's playing dirty, and I'm in their crosshairs." Ryan didn't ask questions. He knew me too well. 2 nights later, he called at 11, his voice urgent. "Lucas, it's bigger than you thought. Rivorton's prepping for a buyout by TechCorp Industries. Your system sync is the crown jewel in their valuation, but they're painting you as a liability. They're planning to sue you for embezzlement to clear any legal risks before the sale." My stomach dropped. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a calculated execution. They're using my work to line their pockets while framing me as a thief. I gripped the edge of my desk, my knuckles white. Ryan kept going. Edward Langston cashed out most of his shares last quarter. Vincent gets a golden parachute. You're the sacrificial lamb. I closed my eyes, seeing my father's face, his belief in me. I promised him a legacy, not a scandal. Couldn't let them win, not like this. Sophie came by again, her voice barely above a whisper. Colin's been meeting with the team, asking if your systems are necessary or just overcomplicated. He's fishing for criticism, Lucas. I think I'm next. Her words hit like a warning shot. They're not just after me. They're dismantling my team, my family. I wanted to protect her, to promise it'd be okay, but the weight of the accusation, embezzlement, betrayal, crushed me. Stay sharp, I told her, my voice steadier than I felt. We'll get through this. But as she left, doubt crept in. What if I can't? What if I lose everything I've fought for? I pushed it away, turning back to the logs, my fingers flying over the keys. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. That night, I tore through my closet, pulling out an old external hard drive, dust coating its edges. My hands shook as I plugged it in, praying it still worked. The screen lit up, and there it was, the original system sync code, written before I joined Riverton, my proof of ownership. I found emails too, Vincent's promises to formalize my rights to the system, words he'd never honored. They trusted my loyalty, thought I'd never fight back. My heart pounded, a mix of relief and rage. This was my leverage, my way out, but only if I moved fast. I checked the company servers, but my access was gone, locked out like a trespasser. Colin was steps ahead, tightening the noose. I slammed my fist on the desk, the sound echoing in the empty apartment. I'd built those systems, and they thought they could lock me out? Not yet. Just when I thought I was alone, my phone buzzed. Marco Delgado's name lit up the screen. I've got copies of your code and deployment logs. Meet me tonight, grocery lot, 9. My breath caught. Marco, with his kids and mortgage, risking everything? I drove to the deserted parking lot, the streetlights casting long shadows. He handed me a USB, his eyes steady. They think I'll roll over, he said. But you've always had our backs, Lucas. I owe you. I gripped his hand, gratitude flooding me. I'm not as alone as I thought. Marco's loyalty was a spark, reigniting the fire I'd nearly lost. I thought of Clara, her voice cold. You're too loyal, Lucas. Maybe she was right, but that loyalty was saving me now. Back home, I plugged in the USB, Marco's files confirming what I'd feared. Colin had been poking into my systems for months, studying my protocols, preparing to take over. But there was more. An email chain between Vincent and Edward mentioned cleaning house before the TechCorp deal, with my name flagged as a potential issue. They weren't just stealing my work. They were framing me to ensure I'd never fight back. I leaned back, the weight of it all pressing down. Why does it hurt so much to be betrayed by those you trusted? I saw my father again, his hand on my shoulder. Build something proud. I thought Riverton was that pride, but it was a mirage. Now, with Marco's files and my old code, I had a chance, not just to survive, but to fight. I opened my laptop. The screens glow a beacon in the dark. They'd underestimated me, and that was their mistake. The river outside my window shimmered, holding secrets. Like me, it ran deeper than they'd ever know. The server room at Riverton was my sanctuary, its hum a steady pulse against the chaos outside. I stood among the blinking racks, my laptop open, the glow illuminating my face. Vincent Ramsey and Colin Warwick thought they'd cornered me, but they'd miscalculated. I wasn't just a cog. I was the architect of their empire, and I'd protect what was mine. My plan began with System Sync, the tool I'd built before Riverton, the heart of their operations. I needed to secure it legally to prove it was mine. I called 3 patent attorneys, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Rush the filings, I told them, wiring fees that burned through my savings. Provisional patents for System Sync's core components would buy me time, a shield against their theft. But as I hung up, doubt crept in. Am I becoming like them, scheming in the shadows? I thought of my father, his voice firm. Build something proud, Lucas. This wasn't pride, it was survival, but the line felt blurry. I needed more than patents. I needed to know how deep their plan ran. Ryan Caldwell called at midnight, his voice taut. Lucas, it's worse than we thought. Collins hired a hacker to inject malware into System Sync. They're setting it to crash during peak production, then pin it on you to bolster their embezzlement case. My blood ran cold. They're not just framing me, they're sabotaging my work to bury me. I saw Clara's face, her words cutting. You're too loyal, Lucas. Loyalty had blinded me to Colin's ambition, but not anymore. Can you trace the hacker? I asked Ryan, my fingers already on the keyboard. I'm on it, he said. But you need to lock down System Sync fast. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. If that malware went live, Riverton would lose millions and I'd lose everything. My name, my legacy, my promise to my father. I opened the system dashboard, my hands steady but my heart racing. They think they can break me. They're wrong. I spent the night coding, weaving a digital signature into System Sync's core, a lock that would flag any unauthorized changes. It wasn't sabotage, it was protection, but the weight of it pressed on me. What if I'm crossing a line? I reached into my pocket, fingers closing around my father's silver dollar, its edges biting into my palm. The pain grounded me, a reminder of his belief. Stand tall, Lucas. I squeezed harder, not letting go. This wasn't about revenge, it was about value, about proving I wasn't the expendable man they thought. By dawn, the signature was in place, a silent guardian. I leaned back, exhaustion burning my eyes, but I wasn't done. I needed allies, evidence, a way to turn their game against them. Sophie Marshall knocked on my door at 7, her face drawn, a USB drive in her hand. You need to hear this, she said, her voice low. I plugged it in, and Colin's voice filled the room, smug and careless. We'll wipe Lucas's fingerprints from the system. The crash will look like his fault, and legal will seal the deal. My stomach churned. He's not just taking my job, he's orchestrating my ruin. Sophie's eyes met mine, fierce despite her fear. I recorded him during a meeting he thought was private, she said. You've always had our backs, Lucas. Now I've got yours. I swallowed hard, gratitude mixing with guilt. Sophie's risking everything for me, and I let her walk into this mess. Thank you, I said, my voice rough. This changes everything. She nodded, a small smile breaking through. Clara was wrong. Loyalty wasn't my weakness. It was my strength, embodied in Sophie, in Marco, in the team I'd built. I met my old divorce lawyer, Ellen Carter, in her cluttered downtown office, the Milwaukee skyline gray behind her. I slid Vincent's emails and the budget logs across her desk. They're framing me for embezzlement, I said, my voice steady. But System Sync is mine, developed before Riverton. Can we fight this? Ellen scanned the documents, her eyes sharp. Your contract's clear. System Sync is yours. The embezzlement charges are flimsy. Forged signatures won't hold up. But we need to move fast. She agreed to draft a cease and desist letter, a warning shot to slow Riverton's legal machine. I left her office, the weight of the accusation still heavy. They want to paint me as a thief, but I'm not the one stealing. I thought of my father, his hand on my shoulder. Build something that lasts. System Sync was that something, and I'd fight to keep it. Marco Delgado met me at dusk in the server room, his face tense but resolute. I've got more logs, he said, handing me another USB. Colin's been accessing your protocols since January. He's feeding them to that hacker. My jaw tightened. Colin, the kid I'd mentored 5 years ago, who'd thanked me for his first job, was now dismantling my life. Why does betrayal always come from those you help? I pushed the thought away, focusing on Marco. You didn't have to do this, I said. He shrugged, his eyes steady. You've always protected us, Lucas. We're not letting you go down alone. His words hit like a lifeline, pulling me from the edge. I wasn't alone. Marco, Sophie, Ryan, they were my army, small but fierce. I worked through the night, using Marco's logs to set a trap for the hacker. I coded a honeypot, a decoy system that would log their every move without touching system sync. Ryan helped, his voice crackling over the phone as we patched vulnerabilities. "This guy's good," he warned. "But you're better." I hoped he was right. If the hacker breached the real system, Riverton would crash and I'd be blamed. My fingers flew over the keys, sweat beading on my forehead. Am I fighting for justice or just survival? The silver dollar sat on my desk, glinting under the lamp. I picked it up, squeezing until my hand ached, grounding myself. "This is for you, Dad, for the promise I made." By morning, the trap was set, and I'd rented an offsite server to store my original system sync code, safe from Riverton's reach. I met Vincent in his office, playing the obedient employee, my face a mask. "I'm focused on the transition," I lied, handing over sanitized documentation. He nodded, his eyes dismissive. "Good. Let's keep this smooth, Lucas." "Smooth for you, maybe." I smiled, hiding the fire inside. They think they've won, but they're playing my game now. Back in the server room, I added one final touch. A license expiration for system sync, set to trigger 8 days after my exit. It wasn't malicious, just business, their kind of business. I sent a confirmation email to my private server, Alpha 7 complete. The countdown had begun. As I left Riverton, the city lights flickered across the river, a silent witness to my resolve. I played their game, but on my terms. Yet doubt lingered, heavy as the silver dollar in my pocket. Am I protecting my legacy, or just proving I can hurt them back? I saw my father's face, his belief unwavering. I promised him pride, not vengeance. Sophie's recording, Marco's logs, Ryan's skill. They weren't just tools. They were proof I wasn't alone. Clara had called me too loyal, but that loyalty had built a team, a family. I squeezed the coin again, its edges sharp. This wasn't over. I'd make them see my worth, not for revenge, but for the man I'd promised to be. The cabin's wooden deck creaked under my boots as I sipped coffee, the lake's surface glinting under the morning sun. It was Monday, 9:17 a.m., and I knew what was happening 30 miles away at Riverton's factories. Right now, every instance of system sync was flashing the same message. License expired. Contact the developer. The production lines, those relentless beasts I'd kept alive for 11 years, would grind to a halt. I pictured the chaos. Foreman shouting, screens frozen, millions in machinery silent. My phone stayed quiet, but I felt the storm brewing. They thought they'd outsmarted me, erased me. They were wrong. I set the mug down, my hand steady, but inside, a question gnawed. Is this justice, or just revenge? I pushed it away, focusing on the plan I'd set in motion. The silver dollar in my pocket, my father's gift, felt heavier today, a reminder of the promise I was fighting for. At 10:30, my phone buzzed, Vincent Ramsey's name lighting up the screen. I let it ring twice, savoring the moment, then answered. "Lucas, what the hell have you done?" His voice was raw, panic bleeding through his polished facade. "The factories are down. Everything's stopped." I leaned against the deck railing, the lake stretching before me, calm as my tone. "It's just license management, Vincent," I said. "Check the original agreement, Clause 7. System syncs mine, and the license expired today." He spluttered, rage mixing with fear. "This is sabotage. We'll sue you into oblivion." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "They're scrambling just as I planned." "You might want to check your embezzlement case first," I said. "I've got proof those signatures were forged." "And the hacker Colin hired?" "I've got that too." Silence stretched, heavy and sharp. "I sent a new licensing agreement to your legal team," I continued. "Recognize my ownership, pay what's fair, and sign an NDA about my exit. Simple business." Vincent cursed, but I hung up, my heart pounding. This isn't victory, it's justice. But why does it feel so hollow? By noon, Riverton's legal team was scrambling, their emails flooding my inbox with demands and threats. I ignored them, driving to the riverfront where I'd gripped my father's coin days ago. The water shimmered, reflecting a sky too bright for the weight I carried. I'd built System Sync to last, to be the legacy my father urged me to create. Now, it was a weapon, and I wasn't sure I liked the man wielding it. My phone buzzed again. Sophie Marshall. "Lucas, it's a mess here," she said, her voice low but urgent. "Colin's trying to fix system sync, but your signature's locking him out. They lost a major client's order. 40 grand in 4 hours." I closed my eyes, relief mixing with guilt. They're paying for their betrayal, but Sophie's caught in the crossfire. "Stay safe," I told her. "This'll be over soon." I hung up, my fingers brushing the coin in my pocket, its edges grounding me. I'd promised my father pride, not destruction. I had to finish this right. An hour later, I sat across from TechCorp's vice president, Michael Grant, in their sleek downtown office, the Milwaukee skyline framed behind him. My lawyer, Ellen Carter, had prepped me, but I carried the real ammunition. Sophie's recording, Marco's logs, Ryan's hacker trace. Riverton's acquisition hinges on system sync. I began, my voice steady. But Colin Warwick's been sabotaging it, hiring a hacker to crash the system and frame me for embezzlement. I played Sophie's recording, Colin's smug voice filling the room. "We'll wipe Lucas's fingerprints from the system." Grant's jaw tightened. I slid over Marco's logs, showing Colin's unauthorized access, and Ryan's report, detailing the malware. "They forged budget transactions to paint me as a thief," I said. "But System Sync is mine, developed before Riverton. I'm not here to destroy them, just to protect what's mine." Grant leaned back, his eyes sharp. "They underestimated me, and now TechCorp sees it." "What do you want, Mr. Hale?" he asked. I met his gaze. "A fair licensing deal with Riverton, and a role leading the tech integration for your acquisition. As a consultant, not an employee." He nodded, a faint smile breaking through. "We'll handle Warwick." By evening, TechCorp's decision came through. Colin was out, effective immediately, his resignation a flimsy cover for the truth. The embezzlement case was dropped, the forged signatures exposed as Vincent's desperate ploy. Riverton's legal team signed my licensing agreement, recognizing my ownership and wiring a fee that dwarfed their insulting bonus. I drove to the lake, the city lights dancing on the water, and pulled out my father's coin. I squeezed it, the pain sharp, grounding me. They tried to break me, but I turned their game against them. Yet the victory felt thin, like a system running on fumes. I thought of Clara, her voice cold. "We want different things." She'd left me questioning my worth, and Riverton had deepened that wound. But Sophie, Marco, Ryan, they'd reminded me I wasn't alone. My father's voice echoed, "Build something proud." I kept that promise, hadn't I? The final confrontation came the next day, in Vincent's office, the air thick with defeat. He sat behind his desk, his suit rumpled, his eyes hollow. "You've made your point, Lucas," he said, his voice flat. "The factories are back online. You win." I stood tall, the coin heavy in my pocket, my voice calm but unyielding. "This isn't about winning, Vincent. It's about value, knowing what I'm worth." I slid the signed licensing agreement across his desk, the paper crisp against the polished wood. "You chose Colin, thought you could erase me. But System Sync? That's mine. Always was." His gaze dropped, shame flickering across his face. I saw the man who'd once called me vital, now reduced to a shadow. Why doesn't this feel like triumph? I remembered my father's hand on my shoulder, his belief in me. I'd fought for him, for myself, but the cost was etched in Vincent's tired eyes. I left his office, the weight of 11 years lifting with each step. Outside, the river flowed, steady and silent, a witness to my journey. TechCorp's contract was waiting, a consultant role with double Riverton's pay and freedom to work on my terms. I signed it that afternoon, the pen steady in my hand. Colin was gone, his ambition undone by his own arrogance. Vincent kept his title, but TechCorp sidelined him, a figurehead with no real power. I should have felt vindicated, but I didn't. I drove to the lakefront, the water calm under a fading sun. Clara's departure, Riverton's betrayal, they'd taught me the same lesson. Trust is fragile, but value is mine to define. I pulled out the silver dollar, its surface catching the light. "I did it, Dad," I whispered, squeezing it tight. Something proud. The river stretched before me, its depths hiding secrets, like the man I'd become. Not just a survivor, but a builder, standing tall. The lake stretched before my cabin, its surface catching the last light of day, a mirror for the quiet I'd fought so hard to find. I stood on the deck, the wooden planks cool beneath my boots, a mug of coffee warming my hands. The licensing fee from Riverton had bought this place. Not grand, just a small retreat with a sagging porch and a view that made the world feel bigger. After 11 years of server rooms and betrayal, it was enough. I'd won, hadn't I? I'd turned Vincent Ramsey's game against him, exposed Colin Warwick's schemes, and walked away with my head high. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, a hollow ache lingered. I thought winning would fill the void, but it only made the silence louder. I reached into my pocket, fingers brushing the silver dollar my father gave me, its edges worn but steady. "Something proud," he'd said. I was still figuring out what that meant. The cabin was my first step, a place to breathe, to rebuild. I'd used the rest of Riverton's payment to start a consulting firm, not for glory but for purpose. Sophie Marshall joined me first, her sharp mind and fierce loyalty a reminder of why I'd fought. Marco Delgado came next, bringing his coding genius and quiet resolve. Half my old IT team followed, not as employees but as partners, building something new, something ours. We worked hard, tackling contracts for manufacturers across the Midwest, but I made time for the lake now, weekends fishing, reading, sketching ideas on a notepad. I wasn't the man who'd slept on his brother's couch after Clara left, nor the one who'd burned himself out for Riverton. I was Lucas Hale, 42, learning to live for myself. But the past clung like damp air, whispering questions I couldn't answer. Did I fight for justice or just to prove I wasn't nothing? A letter arrived one evening, tucked in a plain envelope with Sophie's neat handwriting. I opened it at the kitchen table, the cabin's single bulb casting a warm glow. "Lucas," she wrote, "you gave me more than a job. You showed me what it means to stand up, to know your worth. I was scared, but you made me brave. Thank you." My throat tightened, her words cutting through the armor I'd worn for months. Sophie, who'd risked everything with that recording, saw me as more than a leader. She saw the man I was trying to be. I folded the letter, placing it in a wooden box beside my father's photo, his eyes steady, believing. "You'd like her, Dad?" I said, my voice soft in the quiet. His voice echoed back, "Build something proud." I was trying, but pride felt fragile, like the lake's surface before a storm. Months later, I saw Vincent Ramsey at a downtown restaurant, the kind of place I'd once avoided, its windows framing the Milwaukee skyline. He was alone, his suit slightly wrinkled, his face etched with lines I hadn't noticed before. He started to turn away, then stopped, walking to my table. "You won, Lucas," he said, his voice low, stripped of its old polish. I looked at him, really looked, seeing the toll of his choices. The golden parachute from TechCorp hadn't saved him. He was a shadow, sidelined, his power gone. I could have gloated, could have twisted the knife. Instead, I shook my head. "It wasn't about winning, Vincent," I said, my voice even. "It was about value, knowing what I'm worth." He nodded, a flicker of shame in his eyes, then walked away, his shoulders slumped. I watched him go, feeling no anger, only a quiet clarity. He'd chosen his path and I'd chosen mine. But why didn't it feel like enough? I drove to the lake that night, the cabin dark except for the stars above. I sat on the deck, the silver dollar on the table, glinting under the moonlight. I picked it up, squeezing it gently, its edges no longer cutting. The fight with Riverton had been about more than systems or money. It was about proving I wasn't the man Clara left, the one who doubted his worth. She'd walked away, saying we wanted different things, and maybe she was right. I wanted this cabin, lake, a life I defined. I thought of my father, his hand on my shoulder, his voice clear. "Something proud, Lucas." I'd built that, not just in System Sync, but in the team I'd led, the trust I'd earned. Sophie's letter, Marco's loyalty, Ryan's late-night calls. They were my legacy, more lasting than any code. The river flowed beyond the lake, its current steady, like the man I was becoming. Clara's departure had broken me. Riverton's betrayal had tested me. But they'd both taught me the same truth. My value wasn't theirs to define. I placed the coin back on the table, its surface catching the starlight. "I did it, Dad," I said, my voice steady. Something proud. The words felt true, not because I'd won, but because I'd learned to stand tall, to build again. I looked out at the lake, its depths hiding secrets, like the man I'd become. Not just a survivor, but a builder, a man who knew his worth. Years from now, I'd remember this moment, the quiet of the cabin, the weight of the coin, the river's endless flow. Riverton was a chapter, not my story. Sophie and Marco were my family now, our firm growing, our work meaningful. Vincent's defeat, Colin's fall. They were footnotes, not triumphs. Clara's shadow had faded, her words no longer a wound. My father's voice remained, guiding me. Build something proud. I had, and I would again, not for others, but for myself. Your value is yours to define, and no one can take it unless you let them. I leaned back, the lake whispering its agreement, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. The morning sun filtered through the pines, casting dappled light across my cabin's porch, where I sat with a steaming mug and a notepad full of scribbles. A year had passed since Riverton's factories fell silent, since I'd stood in Vincent Ramsey's office and reclaimed my worth. The lake before me shimmered, its calm a stark contrast to the storm I'd weathered. My consulting firm, Hale Solutions, was no longer a fledgling dream but a steady force, securing contracts with manufacturers across the Midwest. Sophie Marshall and Marco Delgado were my anchors, their trust a foundation stronger than any server rack. We weren't just a company. We were a team, a family forged in the fires of betrayal. Yet, as I sketched plans for our next project, a quiet question lingered. I've built something proud, Dad, but is it enough to heal the scars? I reached for the silver dollar in my pocket, my father's gift, its weight a reminder of the promise that drove me. Our office, a modest space in downtown Milwaukee, hummed with purpose. Sophie was there most mornings, her desk a chaos of spreadsheets and coffee cups, her laughter a balm for the team. But I'd noticed shadows in her eyes lately, a hesitance that hadn't been there before. One evening, as we locked up, she lingered, her voice soft. "Lucas, I'm drowning," she admitted, her gaze fixed on the floor. Riverton's legal threats drained my savings. I'm barely keeping up. My chest tightened, guilt creeping in. She'd risked everything for me, and I hadn't seen her struggle. I thought of my father, his voice clear. "Build something that lifts others, Lucas." I touched her shoulder, my voice steady. "We're a team, Sophie. Let me help." Over the next weeks, I covered her rent, connected her with a financial advisor, and gave her lead on a major contract. Her confidence returned, her smile brighter, and I saw my father's pride in her eyes. Helping her wasn't just duty, it was legacy, proof that my value extended beyond code. An email from TechCorp arrived one crisp morning, its subject line stark, "Official Statement on Riverton Acquisition." I opened it at the cabin, the lake's reflection dancing on my laptop screen. "Mr. Hale," it began, "we acknowledge the misconduct of Riverton Manufacturing's former leadership, including attempts to undermine your contributions. On behalf Bruins of TechCorp, we apologize and invite you to serve as a strategic advisor for our Midwest operations." The words should have felt like triumph, but they didn't. Vincent was a footnote now, Colin Warwick a ghost, their schemes undone. TechCorp's offer, lucrative, prestigious, was validation, but it wasn't what drove me. I replied, accepting the role on my terms, part-time, to focus on Hale Solutions. My father's voice echoed, "Something proud." I'd built that, not for TechCorp's approval, but for the man I'd promised to be. The city lights glittered as I drove to the office, Milwaukee's skyline a reminder of the battles I'd fought. Clara Bennett's shadow had faded, her words, "We want different things," no longer a wound but a truth. She'd left to chase her dreams, and I'd found mine. Not in her arms, but in the life I'd carved from betrayal's ashes. I thought of my father, his hand on my shoulder, his belief unwavering. Rivorton had tested me, tried to break me, but it had forged me instead. Sophie's courage, Marco's loyalty, Ryan Caldwell's late-night calls. They were my true legacy, etched in the systems we'd built, the trust we'd earned. I wasn't the man who'd doubted his worth, nor the one who'd burned for revenge. I was Lucas Hale, 42, a builder, a survivor, a man who knew his value. That night, I sat at the cabin's kitchen table, the silver dollar before me, its surface catching the lamplight. The lake outside whispered, its rhythm steady, like the life I'd claimed. I thought of Vincent, his tired eyes at our last meeting, and felt no anger, only clarity. He'd chosen his path and I'd chosen mine, not to destroy, but to create. Sophie's letter, tucked in my wooden box, spoke of bravery I'd sparked in her. Marco's quiet nod at our last meeting carried the weight of battles shared. I picked up the coin, its edges smooth, and placed it on the table, a quiet vow. "I'm not running anymore, Dad," I said, my voice soft but sure. "I've built something proud." The words settled, true and final, like the lake's endless flow. Years from now, I'd remember this moment. The cabin's warmth, the coin's glint, the lake's gentle song. Hale Solutions would grow, not for fame but for meaning, lifting Sophie, Marco, and others like them. TechCorp's apology, Vincent's defeat, Clara's departure. They were chapters, not my story. My father's voice remained, guiding me. Build something proud. I had and I would again, not for others' approval, but for the man I'd become. My value is my legacy, etched in the lives I've touched, the systems I've built, the promises I've kept. I leaned back, the lake stretching beyond the window, its depths holding secrets, like the man who stood tall, whole at last.